and giving you guys our perspective, right? People who've been kind of in the business, been around recruiting and the draft stuff, myself as an agent. And then this next topic, and the first topic we're going to talk about, D, you're very well positioned to talk about this, as the NCAA revenue sharing. We're in this system right now of NIL. It is what it is with the collectives, but it continues to look like we're trending towards a completely different system.
Yeah, so just some context. This relates to the House settlement, which is it's a settlement of an antitrust suit, which basically laid the groundwork for how schools could revenue share with athletes. So collective money is money from boosters, separate from a school, that goes to players for their NIL rights, marketing, etc. It's not officially paid for play, but of course, as we know, it has a lot to do with the players choosing schools, right? That's just the reality of the situation. So revenue sharing, which is part of this antitrust settlement, this legal settlement, is school money that they get from TV deals, from ticket sales, from fundraising, etc., sharing that revenue with the players. And this is all, again, laid out in the settlement of the antitrust suit from the House plaintiffs against the NCAA. So what that settlement provided is that there would be a revenue sharing cap, basically, of $20.5 million. So schools would be able to pay up to $20.5 million of their own revenue to players. And this is in all sports: men's basketball, women's basketball, football, baseball. Any school that gets in, or any program that gets NIL money or gets school money is part of this. So the way it was originally going to be laid out was that the majority of this money was going to be paid to football, because football is the number one revenue provider, right? It's the reason they get these big TV deals for the most part. So this is rough estimates, and I took this number from Peter Nakos, but this jives with what I've heard talking to people involved in the collective space. Of course, we work with NIL collectives on the side, not as part of Group Chat Sports. But 75% of the revenue was supposed to go to football. So football athletes, football players would get 75% of that $20.5 million cap if a school paid up to the cap. Not every school has to pay up to the cap. It's up to them. So that's about 15 to 17 million. Men's basketball gets about 15%, 5% women's basketball, 5% for remaining sports. Now, this can vary. ACC schools, SEC schools, they have very large baseball programs that get a lot of money. So baseball could get a bigger chunk of that depending on the school. What has happened is that the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights released a memo. And apparently this memo was supposed to come out after the settlement was approved. This House settlement has yet to be formally approved. It's been preliminarily approved. It hasn't been formally approved. So originally, when that settlement was finally approved, which would be sometime in April most likely, the Department of Education was going to put a memo interpreting how that settlement would comply with Title IX. Title IX, we all know, is the federal law which protects students from sex-based discrimination at a school that receives federal funding, and it stipulates that schools must provide male and female athletes with equal treatment and benefits. You've seen this, numerous examples of this, whether it's, male programs getting cut like wrestling and things like that. So there's more female sports. So this has been a very controversial program. Of course, women's sports has increased tremendously since its implementation. So the proponents of it will point to that. The detractors will say, well, it detracts from men's sports. It's just kind of a give and take that way. We won't get into all that. But for revenue sharing purposes, the question is how much of that money goes to male athletes versus female athletes? Because if 75% is going to football players, which of course there's no female football players, then that alone is more than the majority. And it's not half of that money going to women, half the money going to men. If Title IX does apply to revenue sharing, then half of that money would go to females, which means definitely not 75% for football, definitely not 5%, or 15% for men's basketball, definitely not, 5% to baseball or whatever it is, because you would need 50-50. So the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights released a memo saying that they believe that Title IX applied to this and that it had to be 50-50 and that revenue sharing had to be 50-50. This would, of course, completely blow up the existing model, which was anticipating that 75% will go to football. For football fans, this would just mean a lot less money going to pay football players. And this is separate from collective money. The memo clarified that this didn't really apply to collective money, meaning the third-party fan collectives. This is only about revenue sharing under the settlement, school money. So if this ends up being the law of the land, it's going to really impact how schools share revenue. Now, the big picture, as we all know, there's a new administration coming into town in a week. So the next Department of Education, which as of now is projected to be led by Linda McMahon, could revoke this memo and have a whole different perspective on it. So we'll see how this all plays out. If this is the law of the land, this is how everything goes forward, just hypothetically, you're going to see the role of collectives continue to be very strong, and this revenue sharing have much less of an impact than you'd think because less money will be available to go to athletes. So that's the basic summary. We'll see how this goes once the new administration comes in.
And then in terms of NIL collectives, can you explain to people how this could affect how the collectives operate in terms of what the NCAA is trying to do, which is kind of oversee what these third-party NIL collectives can pay the players?
Yeah, the NCAA wants to set up a clearinghouse, which basically would check if, let's say the collective wants to pay a player $2 million. There's a third-party collective of fans and boosters, and they want to pay a player $2 million. The clearinghouse, which I believe would be run by Deloitte, a big accounting firm, would say, is this fair market value for the player or is it pay for play? Which, what's fair market value with pay for play? This is just a legal nightmare and gives the power back to the NCAA indirectly, I guess, because Deloitte would be running this evaluation as opposed to NCAA directly, but it would get you it would get you more money, or sorry, it would have more money subject to review. So we'll see how this all plays out. This is all subject to litigation. This Title IX thing's going to be litigated a ton, no matter which way it goes. So bottom line is there's still a ton of uncertainty here. I don't see it getting any better until either A, Congress grants the NCAA a safe harbor from antitrust law to protect them from antitrust suits, which, I'm not sure I'm particularly personally in favor of, because you're giving an organization that's gotten killed in court numerous times protection from the law, which I don't think is the right thing to do. I don't really trust the NCAA to do the right thing with protection from the law. When they've been forced to abide by the law, they've gotten smoked. So that's one option. The other option is you just blow the whole thing up. You have professional organizations with affiliations to the schools, and then it's collectively bargained with the players as employees, which would be equivalent to what the NFL does, MLB, NBA. And in those cases, the revenue split's a lot closer to 50-50. Here, the proposed revenue split from House, assuming Title IX, just putting that all at the side, you're talking about 20%, a little more than 20% of the revenue goes to the athletes, as opposed to 50-50 splits, which you see in the professional sports.
And then just kind of wrapping this up, what's the timeline that fans should be looking at here for this to continue to move along? April is when the decision gets made,
right? For approval, approval of the settlement. But then you still have, there's going to be lawsuits challenging that. There's going to be this Title IX thing. You don't know if this memo is going to be the same approach as the incoming administration. There's just a lot to figure out. I don't see this getting resolved very well. And then, are these collective agreements going to be voided right before the season by this clearinghouse? I mean, if Dylan Stewart's making $2 million from a collective, or is the clearinghouse in August going to say, hey, Dylan Stewart, sorry, you're not getting $2 million that you were going to get before, and you can't jump in the portal? Like, the whole thing is very bizarre, and I don't see it ending any way other than either, again, complete safe harbor for the NCAA to do whatever they want, or some sort of more professionalization of the leagues.
So we'll get into some football now. We bored, I'm sure we bored some people with some of that stuff, but this is the future. It's crazy just how much it's dynamic in the sense of, like, it's changing every single year. We've seen different strategies. We've seen the reports of programs kind of loading up in terms of spending as much as they can now, trying to load their rosters up because they understand the change is coming. So we'll continue to track this here. I mean, it really changes the core of college football. So we have to be on top of it here at Group Chat Football Live. Appreciate everyone who's on with us. But like I said, we'll get to some football related stuff. And